So let me, I mean, one of the things I particularly, when I engage with companies in the space of strategy where the plane is going down, as I often call it, to lift the plane up, what often happens is a sense of freneticism. It's this fact that we need to do 50 things to fix things. And you've beautifully put it that we as a team needed to focus on four things.
Yeah.
Lift the culture, lift the 15,000 people that work here, get the trains back on board. Tell me, it must have been difficult, right? Because there are many competing priorities. And as you've indicated, the nature and complexity of SOCs is there's political principles, there's public requirements, there's parliament, there's the auditor general, there's societal expectations, there's financiers. How did you guys go about just sitting back, moving from the dance floor, going to the balcony and saying, let's just see this systemically rather than frenetically?
Yeah. You know, we also had a golden opportunity, if I can put it that way. Because there was also a lot of, at the time, and I'm talking 2 years back, and I don't want to be speaking about other entities, but there was focus on other things happening.
Sure.
Load shedding at the time and so forth. And it gave us an opportunity. And we said this deliberately. Let's put our heads down. Let's not lift our heads and let's get things done.
Right.
Because the biggest success, the biggest positive from a publicity and communication is if you can show tangible progress.
Of course.
And therefore it gave us a 12-month period. We were a little bit out of the spotlight. And it was an opportunity for us to really then put foot to the wheel, so to speak, and really ensure that we turn some of these things around. Yes, all of those pressures, we do have it. The pressures are slightly reduced when you can show you've made progress. Even if it's the low-hanging fruits, bringing back a corridor every 6 months or so forth, it shows you're moving in the right direction. So I think I also want to say we were fortunate at that point in time. There was a 12-month window that we could really just, put our head down and get things done. And we focused on doing that.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I want to relay a story that, interestingly, Minister Praveen Gordhan in this room shared with me when he was Minister of Finance. National Treasury back in the day did quite a bit of work in terms of the spatial transformation patterns of what apartheid did from a country perspective. And one of the big pieces of research work that National Treasury did was they came out and said from the research that South Africa is a 40-by-5 world. 40% of South Africa's working population lives on average in 40 square meter homes, travels on average 40 kilometers to get to work, spends on average 40 minutes of their commute time to get to work before load shedding became a reality, and spends 40% of their disposable income on transport to get to work, which means that rail becomes a much more important societal imperative to be able to get people in and out of working environments, because unfortunately we've created spatial patterns that have most of our society living outside of working areas.
Yeah.
That obviously is a big factor in terms of what drives purpose, what drives why we need to get PRASA right. Talk a little bit around some of the achievements in the last 3 years. I mean, a lot of this is, as you say, 10% of the lines from 40 to 4. A workforce that was that faced trauma, right?
Yeah.
A challenging external environment, lots of negativity from a country perspective, a big spotlight on SOCs. Talk a little bit around some of the success now.
So let me just first touch on, before I get to some of the achievements. The role of rail to the economy as well as the social fabric is critical, particularly passenger rail. I mean, to some extent, when we have the discussion internally, at PRASA, we're all fortunate to work there, because actually our role is a noble one.
Yes.
If you look at the difference you're making to millions of people. So when it comes to that contribution that we are talking about, and just to give a sense, if you look at, yes, we've recovered 31 of the 40. But if you look at the number of passengers that are on the system, it's nowhere where it needs to be in terms of playing that role. I mean, our vision is rail must be the backbone of an integrated transport network. If you look at the numbers today and where we are not there yet. We're heading in the right direction, but a lot of work still needs to happen. So just last year, we moved, or we're responsible for 40 million passenger trips for the year. And that is very low from where we should
be.
Really? Yeah. In 2014, we were sitting at 600 million.
Wow.
So we are still growing. When I say we've recovered 31 corridors, we are still not running high frequency trains.
Right.
You should be seeing a train every 5 minutes in the peak period. We're running a train probably every 40 minutes or so,
Right.
because we don't have a signaling system.
Okay.
And that's some of our priorities that we are speaking today. But again, if you look at the extent of our network, 2,300 kilometers, we've got 400 and odd stations. To rebuild that, you don't do it overnight.
Of course.
So these 31 corridors that we have done, we've ensured trains are running. On some of them, we are running higher frequencies, up to 15 minutes in the peak. We've recovered 290 stations out of the 400, where we've got now the basic functionality that has been done. And importantly, where it's been a big injection into the economy is PRASA in the last 2 years, for the first time, has been able to execute on its capital program.
Brilliant.
One of the criticisms has always been you are underspending.
Yes.
You're not able
Yes.
to execute.
Yep.
And hence you find sort of the infrastructure, the quality is not where it should be. So in the last 2 years, we not only executed 100%, we even exceeded. Just in the past 2 years, our capital program, you're looking at a 35 billion investment that we've put back into the economy,
Right.
both in terms of infrastructure as well as manufacturing. And if you look at the knock-on effect from that in terms of jobs, both direct and indirect, the induced sort of benefits that come with all of that, you're looking at over the next 3 years with the investment we are doing in a total of 189 billion in terms of the knock-on effects that we're talking about.
Wow.
Just the jobs, direct jobs in the last year was 12,000 jobs we created.
Sure.
33,000 in terms of the indirect and direct jobs. So over and above the importance of having a functioning rail system, it's also the rebuild, the capital injection that we are doing. And when we move back to your question, I think, Abdullah, it's an important one about the percentage of household income being spent on transport.
Yeah.
And this is why this is such a noble role. I mean,
Yes,
one of the
yes.
most rewarding things that you can see is when you launch a corridor. And we are there together sometimes with the minister launching the corridor and so forth, and you start engaging with the passengers.
Yes.
That's when you really, that is the biggest reward of this job. And the one story I always tell my staff when I'm going on the road show, and I'll tell it here, is when one of the first corridors we brought back was Mabopane to Pretoria.
Oh.
And I engaged with one of the gogos there,
Yes.
a granny. And she was still a domestic worker. I mean, she should be on retirement, right? A domestic worker living in Mabopane, traveling to the Pretoria suburbs to do the domestic duties there. And it was costing her from Mabopane, this is when the trains were not running, to the suburbs, taking a taxi, a bus, and other modes of transport, over 100 Rand a day.
Wow.
Now, if you add up that for whether it's 20 or 25 days, you're talking about 2,500 Rand, close to 3,000. And you know what domestic workers earn.
Yes.
So she was easily spending over 50%, probably close to 60 or 70% of her earnings just on transport.
Wow.
She hasn't spent anything on food, clothing, recreation, or anything.
Yeah.
That is just on transport. And as I'm actually talking about it, I'm getting emotional, because I was emotional when she explained it to me. Because when we launched that service, to get the train from Mabopane to Pretoria and back home, it cost 15 Rand.
Sure.
To get from Naledi to Johannesburg and back, it cost 15 Rand. And if you put that into context, it's less than 1 liter of fuel
Exactly.
that you are paying.
Yes.
Just to get a sense of the affordability of rail. And what we put back into that granny's pocket, I mean, she's probably spending now, I mean, she's saving more than 70% of what she was spending on transport before. And that's the impact you are doing on society by bringing back these rail services.
100%.
And it's across the board. Wherever we launch, this is what is being